Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Oh, we're still more people are coming. So tonight we have a very special guest. Our Attorney General is joining us, Phil Weiser. So first, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sally Boccella, and I'm running for Senate District 23. And if you'd like to learn more about my campaign, please visit my website at sallyforcolorado.com. I will put it in the chat so it's easy for you to find. Tonight, we're going to be discussing law enforcement integrity and transparency, the Faithless Elector Supreme Court case, and I'd also like to touch on some of the cases that our Attorney General is working with other Attorney Generals on in regards to our Safe Banking Act and environmental rollbacks, and then also touch on some of his op-eds on resilience and grace. And then we'll take your questions after. So please write your questions in the chat, and then I'll be able to read them. Welcome, Phil.
It's great to be here with you, Sally. We're excited for your candidacy. We need leaders like you. Thank you for stepping up. It's an honor to support you.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to have you support me and to have your friendship. Thank you. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about the topic right now that's very hot. Law enforcement integrity and transparency. Right now, they have a bill that they introduced, passed the Senate. It was bipartisan, fantastic, and now it's in the House. The Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Bill. And we also wanted to touch on some of the things that you mentioned in your campaign during 2018 in regards to law enforcement integrity. And I have some questions that we can follow up on, specifically on certain things that people want to know about. So I'll let you take it from here.
Well, first, I want to say that the way this bill moved along is very much consistent with your style, Sally, which is data-driven, it's thoughtful, it's about how do we solve problems. And here we have problems on three different frontiers. First off, how do we hire police officers? How do we train them? And then how do we hold them accountable and remove them when they act in ways that don't represent public integrity? And this bill is going to help us move forward on all three fronts. And our office plays a central role. We oversee the Peace Officer Standards and Training Program. And so one of the things I'm excited about doing is helping to reimagine and catalyze recruitment and training of police officers. And part of what we need, and we haven't always had, is an awareness of what are the core competencies to be an effective police officer. Yeah. And one of the competencies that I would say is not discussed enough is, and you hear different words about this, emotional intelligence is one word, or emotional resilience. Let me just tell you a story to capture it. When I took a tour of the Sterling prison, the correctional officer said, I've got my taser and I've got my voice. And I was a nurse before I was a corrections officer, so I learned to use my voice before I use my taser. That's what we need from law enforcement, that level of emotional awareness, so that we don't escalate situations needlessly. And obviously, George Floyd was the latest, most painful example, but not the only one, of situations where people died because law enforcement acted inappropriately. This Floyd case is an extreme case. It underscores the worst elements that can happen when officers fail to act responsibly. And so we in Colorado are developing what I believe are going to be model standards. We ratchet back the allowable use of force. We call for more training, accountability, and we create more tools for oversight, including use of body cameras. And if you're a bad cop, body cameras are your worst enemy. If you're a good cop, body cameras are your best friend.
So just talking a little bit about that, I actually had some people who live in District 23 reach out to me, and they're part of a police family, and they were concerned about the original bill, the way it was written, and a couple of things that they were concerned about was, the insurance part. I'm glad that they amended that, allowing police officers to have the insurance. When they still are going to take into effect that if they do something that's criminal, the city or wherever the local municipality will not be sued the actual officer will be sued. But I think that it is fair that they are allowed to take insurance, a liability insurance. I mean, a doctor does it, a nurse does it. So that was one of the concerns. And then the other thing that was brought up too was that they felt like, police officers were being, as a whole, were being vilified. And I said, I tried to explain how a bill does go through the process, and it did go through the process, and it did get amended, and that's where we are right now. And that's why I think it was bipartisan, almost unanimously. But they were concerned that Colorado wouldn't be safe, and that good law police officers would not want to be police officers. So how do you feel about that?
Well, you've given the bottom line, which is this process, this discussion was collaborative, it's bipartisan, and insofar as people raised concerns, there was an effort to deal with those concerns.
And I think they did deal with them really effectively.
And the product that we now see is reflecting dialogue. And part of what we need to make sure that we do is continue this dialogue. I will tell you, this bill will help us improve police integrity, accountability, but it's not going to necessarily make the system perfect. So Jerry raises a question I want to pick up, and she says she worries that because of a culture, you may have bad cops who are enabled by good cops. And we all need to remember this theme. Jerry is a stalwart and courageous. Bad things happen when good people are silent. It was those three cops watching the cop who murdered George Floyd who should scare us. How is it when good people say nothing? And obviously there's extreme examples in our history of this. We have to worry about culture, and that is an issue. And part of what the bill does is it specifically has a require to intervene. So if you fail to intervene, that is dereliction of duty, and that's meant to get at this. I don't know if people saw the movie A Few Good Men.
Yes.
It played with this theme a little bit about how you can have a culture where the person in authority is acting corruptly, badly, whatever words you want to use, and then others are complicit. And so I agree with Jerry, that's something you have to worry about. Culture change is hard. We've got to keep working at it.
And I think that, these are the steps forward that will actually regain trust with the law enforcement. That's how I feel. I think that because of certain things and just a few people that exercise power wrongly and criminally, I think that because of moves like having a policy like this, and then there'll be others, I think that it really does, it will place confidence and it will place trust back in with the community in regards to police officers. Because I know many wonderful police officers, and they're there to support, they're there to help, they're there to keep you safe. And, you should never feel afraid to have to go up to a police officer for help. And I think that when we move into policies that hold accountability, I think that really does reflect integrity in that respect.
I think you're on to that point. And Sally, part of what equips you so well is integrity is so at your core. You represent that true north, and I do think that is a value that you're going to bring to discussions. And I think part of the moment we're in, it's worth underscoring. It's not only trust in law enforcement that we are struggling with. We're dealing in a moment where we're struggling with trust in the rule of law. We're trusting in our governmental institutions more broadly. So law enforcement is a issue we're talking about now, but I will tell you, if you pull back the lens and you ask people, do you trust government officials generally? Yeah. We have a huge trust deficit. We have a huge integrity issue. And so for us who want to be in public service, we have to work hard to build that trust. And one thing this bill tries to do, which I believe, and I know you as well, is transparency and accountability. We need good people in government who are transparent, who are accessible, who are accountable. If we can't build trust in the rule of law, in law enforcement, in our system of government, our nation's project of self-governance is in trouble.
Do you mind if I take some questions related to this subject while we're on it?
Go for it.
Okay. I'm going to go to the top here. So you answered Jerry's question already. Michelle would like to know, what can citizens do specifically to request and encourage training reforms in our state for law enforcement officers, from local to state to county?
So this is a really important point, and boy, we need public servants like yourself, and we need citizens like Michelle. Michelle's level of engagement, her commitment to being informed, her ability to view issues in a positive lens, that's part of the civic energy we so desperately need during this moment. So one thing is, I mentioned on the public official side, talking about you, Sally, we need public leaders who have integrity, who are accessible, who are transparent, who will be held accountable. We need citizens who are engaged, who get informed, who hold public officials accountable. And so wherever you live, there are people who represent you, district attorneys, sheriffs, state senators. Engage with them, ask them questions in a constructive, collegial way. And that is going to be much more powerful than you can ever imagine. A lot of times people talk themselves out of engagement and miss opportunities to make a difference. And I would just say, for someone like Michelle who's asking, look for those opportunities to make a difference. And there are so many places. So for example, the school system. I'm really concerned about the school to prison pipeline. There's a conversation that's been happening, and this hit me during the campaign, where I went to, first, I think I was in Aurora, and someone said, the criminal citations being given out by school resource officers in the high schools are going through the roof, and our kids are getting criminal records. And then I went to St. Vrain, and they said, oh, we don't give criminal citations to our students because we would want them to have a record. That can only escalate and be bad for their future. And I thought, wait, what's wrong here? When it's students of color in Aurora, one thing is happening. When it's white kids in St. Vrain, Boulder County, something else is happening. And that was a real warning sign to me about this issue. And so we're working on this issue. We're going to announce some steps soon about this, and be working to help address this issue.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was something back when I was living in North Carolina. That was a huge issue within the school system. And I was actually part of, I was invited to be part of a study circle that spoke on racism and specifically how to narrow the gap of school to prison pipelines. And one of the things too was just what you said, and then also too, like the suspensions, right, or taking them out of class. I think that you're only exasperating, when you're taking them out of learning, right, taking them out of school, and they will not be able to be productive citizens in our society without that education. So I think that that's critical in my mind. I'm glad that we're talking more about this, the school to prison pipeline, because we can do so much just right there. That's what, I really do. I believe that. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jerry, so far for your questions. Fred would like, okay, we'll wait on Fred's, because that doesn't have to do with this question right now. Oh, here we go. Lynn wants to know, in New York State is considering legislation as relates to police brutality, moving investigations authority and responsibility from local DAs to the AG. Would you support that in Colorado?
One of the challenges that every state has is developing its culture. And Colorado has developed a culture. We've talked about this. Local control is a very strong norm. And so I approach conversations like the one Lynn raises with an awareness that we have a cultural norm of local control, and this would disrupt that norm. So I am respectful of that norm. And in the first instance, I would like to enable that tradition to be effective. I recognize, and we've talked about this before, Sally, that not every local governmental actor is equal in terms of its effectiveness in representing its citizens and
Yes.
operating competently. And you want the state to be there as a backstop. So the way the state is currently as a backstop is the governor can always ask the attorney general, hey, I want you to look into this. But that's meant as a sort of last resort. And the first resort is really to have the local government be the primary actor. So I guess I would approach this hesitantly, cautiously, and we have to continue to think through our commitment to local control. And I try to honor that across the board and not sort of pick and choose if I can.
I think that's an excellent way to look at it. I think when you first see something like that, especially in light of what we've seen, I think that you think, oh yes, we want the attorney general to step in, right? Because we want something done swiftly. And I think that you explained that really well. That we do want to give our local government the chance to address these things. But I do feel that if that doesn't happen, then we need to bring in the attorney general, because we do need something to happen, right? We do need effect. So, I mean, that would be my answer, Lynn. You asked me the same question. I agree with Bill, but I also think too that that we have to be able to connect and ask our attorney general to step in on times when local is not getting things done. So, and that happens sometimes. So that would be my answer. Thank you, Lynn. Oh, Anna has a question. Outside SB 217, since that's the new development, what has your office been doing in the last 1.5 years to address police brutality and systemic racism? It's a couple parts here. The next question is concrete changes and examples, please.
All right, so let me mention a few. One effort we started is with the Anti-Defamation League around hate crimes, which have been on the rise and is a painful example of white supremacy in its ugliest forms. And we are in the process of creating more training and guidance for law enforcement agencies to enable better reporting and responses to hate crimes. Second, we're also working on other training, particularly, and this is in response to a group called Together Colorado, show-ups, which have been done in a way that's been discriminatory, having misleading identifications, often of young Black men. And so we've been working with the city of Denver and the city of Grand Junction on trainings to address improper witness identification. And then third, within our office itself, we've been developing a diversity and inclusion initiative to make sure that our office is inclusive and our office is committed to equity. And that includes also having internship and mentoring programs to bring more people of color into the legal profession. So we work with a group called Law School Yes We Can, high school and college students for the first time ever, often first generation, having internships in our office. Another group called the Boulay Scholars. So those are a few of the ways we've been working on addressing the legacy of racism and the challenges that we as a nation need to confront.
Wow, did that answer your question, Anna? Great. Thank you, Anna. Okay, we have another question from Jen. During her time as a city council member is that Dacono? That's also my district. She said they held a lot of discussions about body cameras. The biggest problem for our small city was the money to store the information. I know that voters will ask about this. Do you have any recommendations on how to explain what the cost is, that it's well worth it, and that we have transparency? And this actually was brought up by somebody else on another thread that I saw today about the cost of cameras.
I've got a few thoughts on this, Jen, and I really appreciate the spirit that you ask it in. In my statement, I about this bill, and I'm supportive of it, obviously, I call out the need for funding. One of the challenges we have on criminal justice improvement efforts broadly is we need to make investments that cost money that will pay later dividends. And actually, one of the painful realities of governance is it's hard to get the money to make those front-end investments. And I can give you multiple examples. Body cams are a great example. Pretrial or cash bail reform is another example. A third example might be drug treatment for people who are addicted to opioids. All three of those are areas where we spend money up front. Re-entry programs, leaving prison would be a fourth example. We spend money up front, they pay dividends down the road. But our budget cycles are often narrow. And so, Jen, what I would say is we have to think about this as an investment that you amortize over time. Because having body cams can both enable you to protect good cops from liability and to identify and address bad cops for misconduct. And body cams may be the single most powerful tool to do this. Both of those consequences have the benefit, as you put so beautifully, Sally, building trust in law enforcement. Because when law enforcement is able to, and the bill has a whole disclosure regime, we've got nothing to hide. Everyone can watch this incident for yourself. So last night, for example, someone showed up at a domestic violence call where a woman called and said, my husband's trying to kill me. Someone showed up, a woman cop was shot, was saved by her bulletproof vest, and then she returned fire and killed the suspect. Now, I think everyone would agree, when you're shot and you're saved only by your bulletproof vest, you have every right to protect yourself. The person who was shot clearly, obviously, had a gun, was a danger, and might have killed his partner had the cops not been there. And one of the things we do in our office is we have the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board, so that everyone who dies in a domestic violence situation, we try to say, what has happened here? How could we save lives? And obviously the first big ticket item is people are mostly killed with firearms. So we need to get better at enforcing a law that's on the books but has no enforcement teeth. When you're adjudicated guilty of a domestic violence offense, you've got to turn in your firearm. But right now that's never actually enforced. So people who are abusers end up keeping their firearms. The second big opportunity is the extremist protection order. Right. When we hear someone's in jail and they says, I'm going to go kill my ex-wife, we got to do something about it. In fact, in Larimer County, they had someone in the county jail where the person said something like that. They got an extremist protection order, and then the guy challenged the law as unconstitutional. He lost. He's not going to be able to have access to weapons because we know he's a threat. And so we have to use all the tools we can to ensure that we're protecting people. And body cams are a way to show the public what's happening, build confidence that law enforcement is there to protect the public. And when law enforcement acts outside the law, engages in improper behavior, misconduct, wrongdoing, we've got them on tape. So it's an investment, Jen. And if you start from the premise that one of the most important foundations of law enforcement is the trust of the public, then this investment is, in effect, like the investment in the body protection that saved the woman last night, the bulletproof vest. You need both things. You need bulletproof vests and you need body cams.
So I also want to touch a little bit about the data collection, because it just made me think of it when you mentioned about when a domestic violence case comes to your office and then there's a loss of life. So is there data collection in regards, like, is your office keeping data on all of these things? Because when I had the event on domestic violence, and I had Gordon McLaughlin and I had Callie Renison on and Alexis King, we were talking about that, and they were basically saying that it's really not something that is a strong thing that they do in the district attorney's office, which is something that they both want to change moving forward. But I think that, in regards to data collection, you have evidence, right? And then with evidence, you can bring that to someone like a legislator and you can say, look, we need a policy, or we need But right now, they're not really collecting the data. And I noticed that in this enhanced law enforcement integrity accountability act, they do have a component that's related to that, but there is a little bit of controversy. How do you feel about that?
I do believe in what Justice Louis Brandeis said, which is sunlight is among the best of disinfectants. And I believe that in a few ways. Let me start with one and then I'll answer your question. One is by collecting data, you see different outcomes with different inputs. Durango, Colorado has a very robust training where they bring in actors to train their police officers on de-escalation. Farmington, New Mexico, across the border, has no such training. In the last year, there were 0 officer-involved shootings in Durango. There were a whole bunch in Farmington, New Mexico. So that tells you something. Durango's a bright spot. What are they doing? How do we replicate it? So what's good about data collection is you get both the bright spots, the Durangos, and you get the problem areas, the Farmingtons. And that's super important to addressing public policy problem solving. If you don't have data, it's hard to manage a situation. Or as one person put it, you can't manage what you can't measure. So we need to be measuring how the law enforcement community interacts with the public in ways where we know there are potential issues. And this bill does call for more data collection, data analysis. That's actually going to happen from the Department of Public Safety. It won't happen in my department. And I do believe in data collection, and that's something that this bill is going to advance.
Okay, great. Let's get to some of these other questions. We're going to spend a lot of time on this because it's a hot topic. So how does Colorado stack up percentage of people incarcerated for nonviolent crimes? Skew of inmate population towards minorities. How are we doing? And recidivism, or I can't really understand what this says. How are we doing on recidivism versus other states? Do we have any for-profit prisons? Oh, we do. We have.
Yeah. So there are a lot of questions here. Let me go through them. People of color are incarcerated, African Americans in particular, 3x times their part of our population. And that obviously should get our attention. Our recidivism rate, which means the rate at which people leave prison and then return within, let's say, 3 years, is about 50%. So both of those statistics should make your stomach turn.
Yeah.
And then in terms of for-profit prisons, yes, we do have some. Our governor is working on ratcheting that back, and we have to manage our prison population. The best ways to manage it are on the back end, things like reentry programs, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then the front end, make sure we're using alternatives to incarceration, addressing the school to prison pipeline. So on the back end, we do know that there are reentry programs that work. They take an investment like education programs in prisons, efforts like the Second Chance in Aurora, where you sort of let people go to a program that they help you find a job. And our current head of corrections is working really hard on this. I'm going to work with him developing a Second Chance employer network. This could be true for people with opioid substance abuse disorder as well, and often the two go together. We need employers who are willing to give people a second chance, who recognize that could be a good investment on their part, and it will pay great social dividends as well.
Great. Thank you, Leslie, for that question. Okay, now Barb had a question that she had emailed me, and we might have covered some of it with Anna. So she wanted to know in regards to what you had said during your campaign and where you are right now in making those things happen at the office. So she wanted to know, the first one was the creation of the Deputy AG position focused on inclusion, diversity, and would advise on criminal justice reforms. So she wanted to know about the perspectives of the BIPOC population and their needs. That was the first part. So
first off, I have someone who I have already picked out as my Deputy Attorney General for Diversity and Inclusion. It's going to come as we roll out our diversity inclusion impact team. Stay tuned. I don't know that I'll be making a public announcement about it, but maybe I should, and maybe I will. We've already had a sort of ramp up to our diversity and inclusion effort, because we had a task force help us develop a set of recommendations that we're going to roll out. So thanks for the encouragement to make it public. But yeah, we're very committed to diversity and inclusion. The internship and mentorship program mentions a piece of that. And we do want to be a model employer in that regard. On criminal justice reform more generally, I have a team really working on that. It'll include diversity and inclusion, but it'll also include our community engagement director and the head and the assistant deputy of our criminal justice section. And we have a robust agenda on criminal justice reform. I've talked about pretrial reform. I've talked about school to prison pipeline. I've talked about reentry. I'm talked about drug treatment as an alternative to incarceration. All of those need to be tools in how we reform our criminal justice system and get away from incarcerating so many people.
Great. The second one is the creation of the database using the data-driven evidence-based policies that would track police determinations and misconduct. I think we already touched on this.
In the bill. Let me answer that. We push for that, and it's in the bill, and it should be up within the year. And the database will not only include police officers fired for cause, but it will also include some other notable failings by officers. And I have to say, did Barb ask me both those two questions?
Yes, this is all Barb.
Barb, you're awesome. So remember, Barb, I don't know if Barb was on earlier. I talked about Michelle. We need engaged citizens who get informed and hold people accountable. That is what Barb is doing right now. I said I would do these two things during my campaign: create a deputy attorney general for diversity and inclusion, and create a database of officers who were fired for cause. I got the legislature to mandate the, and the good thing about the legislature mandating it, why I was keen to do it that way, then it's not just about me doing it. It's now a requirement that my successors have to do too. So we already were getting this working. So this was in our pipeline, but now it's in law. It has to be done. Diversity and inclusion is going to be a norm that I hope I create that's so strong, others will keep it as well. But it's also, like I said, it's like Barb holding me accountable, which is exactly what we need our citizens to do with our leaders.
And in regards to that, she said, when you're keeping a record in regards to the repeat offenders, will that also, keep them from moving to a different department? Because we don't want them to be out there. Even so, if they did some misconduct in one area and then they move on to the next area, and it's like they got a clean slate. So
Barb is is Barb a lawyer, by the way? Barb, are you a lawyer? I'm really very, very deep questions. Let me give a couple answers and trying to get too lawyerly. One answer is the sunlight is a best disinfectant. She's a software engineer, that's good too. Good mindset. When you create this database and it's public, and then the person gets hired, you have an ability to call out the hiring authority and saying, what are you doing here? The second thing is they're hiring someone with either, I'll use the legal terms, actual knowledge or constructive knowledge, because everyone hired should look at this database first. And if something happens, the person does the same thing again, they're gonna have to explain themselves. And the third, Barb, we are gonna look at what we can do within our authority to create more accountability. And we'll keep looking at that, because I do think relying on both the threat of legal liability and the threat of public shaming may not be enough.
Great. And then she had also said too that she remembers you discussing reviewing Colorado peace officers' standards and training the post.
Yes.
With the intent of making those improvements. And you are doing that. Your office is doing that.
Yeah, and that was what I talked about before. Yeah. The end game goal is to really reimagine and transform how we train public safety officers. And I've got a great partner in the head of this. The legislature just gave us some money. We're going to start from first principles, do this job task analysis so that we can really elevate this program. And this has been one of the upsides of the current moment we're in. The head of the community college system reached out to me and said, how do we make sure that our community colleges that have police academies are really at the cutting edge? And so we're moving from worlds where we literally were having to suspend some academies because they weren't operating at minimal adequacy to now stretching to how do we really raise our standards.
Oh, gosh, that's phenomenal. I mean, I love that they reached out to you and now they want to implement something. I
Yeah,
think
now that's what we need. We need
we
everyone saying,
do.
what can we do? How can we work together? How can we make things better?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wrap up this portion and we're going to move on. Did you want to just touch a little bit on your experience in regards to the Faithless Elector Supreme Court case? Because that was so exciting to listen to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd say a few things on this. First off, this point about building trust in our politics, in our institutions, this point about educating and elevating our discourse is important to me. And what's at issue in this case, and we did a whole Colorado Goes Supreme educational series on this for students of all ages to learn about our Constitution. Because a lot of people don't think about how the Electoral College works, and it's really been up to the states to implement this. In Colorado, we passed a law where we said we want to make sure that everybody is getting their vote counted. So if people in Colorado vote for one presidential candidate, we want our electors to follow that, and that is going to be required by Colorado law. Well, last election, one of our electors said, no, I want to vote the way I want to vote, and I'm going to argue that I've got a constitutional right to do that. And they made the proverbial federal case out of it. They got the federal appeals court in Denver to agree with them. That was different than another ruling in Washington. So the Supreme Court took both cases, and I had the experience of being a law clerk there for Justice Ginsburg. So I was ready and able to take this on and argue it myself. I had hoped to do it in the building, but instead I did it by telephone.
Which is harder, right? Because you can't read body language, you can't anticipate.
That's right. But you do get the benefit of your, in my case, my wife Heidi and my son Sammy bringing me cake afterwards.
I saw that.
There was that. And then the other thing which was interesting is they changed the format. Because it's not in person, it couldn't be the usual free-for-all. So instead, each justice got their own turn to ask you questions, which meant in the unusual situation, Justice Thomas, who's a big introvert, asked questions. He doesn't like that free-for-all, so he kind of stays out of it. But this time, he asked questions, and he asked a question of my opposing counsel that made the whole argument for me on multiple levels. He said, because our whole argument was that the state has the right to oversee electors and not allow electors to cast illegal votes. And so he said to my opposing counsel, are you saying on your argument that an elector could cast a vote for Frodo Baggins and that would be okay? Which showed he understood my argument, and it showed he had an appreciation for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I know that was, it took it to a whole nother level. Yeah, I think people who don't normally geek out on stuff like that, like me, probably were very excited about listening to that case because of those references.
One case, people can listen to it. There's a podcast app, Oyez, O-Y-E-Z, or you can just go to oyez.com and listen to it online. And you can talk about it with your family.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the coalition of AGs and what you guys are doing together, because you know I love that. I love when we work together. So a couple of things I wanted to touch on because we're running out of time. Oh, yeah, we're running out of time. So tell me a little bit about the Safe Banking Act, because you know that's one of my priorities is industrial hemp. And I just wanted to know what's being done and how does that look for us?
We're working really hard, and I led the effort now in 2 separate pushes because the current situation is scary. If you're selling cannabis products, you are keeping the cash in ways that may not be safe, which is a public safety risk. It's also harder to manage compliance. We need the banking system to be able to bank these businesses, but that requires a change in federal law. So we got a coalition of AGs together and have pushed this point. The House of Representatives has now passed this, so it's up to the Senate.
So it's part of the stack of 400 bills that's waiting there. 422, I think, or something like that. Well, okay, so we're halfway there. That's good. I also wanted to touch a little bit about something that's happening in Greeley. We had several deaths happen at the JBS facility, meatpacking facility. Tell me a little bit about what you are doing about that. And also, I was reading your resilience op-ed, and I'm going to kind of bring those two together. We live in a society of efficiency, right, and convenience. And it really made me think of JBS when you mentioned about how Americans prize efficiency over resilience. And I do think moving forward with this pandemic, we will have to change our culture, our work ethic culture, where if somebody is sick, they should not feel shamed and they should be able to stay home and not infect everybody they work with, and have paid sick leave. And I mean, it's all these things, right, that we've known all about. That's the silver lining with this pandemic, is that it really brought into focus all of these critical issues that we were already discussing. And now it wasn't just happening to this group of people, it's happening to a lot of people, right? And so I wanted to just bring those up, and maybe we can talk about both of those if you can.
Yeah, let me start with the first theme, riff on it, and then go to the second. The second theme, then go to the first. So resilience. For people who haven't heard this term, let me give you a short definition. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, which means you create a system that has redundancy, it has alternative pathways. The opposite of resilience is a single point of failure. The internet is an example of a resilient network because it's interconnected among multiple connections. And the internet, for Barb, our software engineer friend, it was designed as an alternative to the packet switch traditional telephone network, where if you took out a big central office, the whole network went down. With the internet and so-called packet switching, there are so many points of interconnection, you can route around a failure in the network. So that gives you an example of what a resilient network looks like versus what a vulnerable network looks like. With the benefit of COVID, we can see that we were running our society on very little margin for error. We didn't build up testing capacity for COVID. In some cases, our food supply chains were strained. And the more we continue to drive in the name of efficiency at the sacrifice of resilience, we're setting ourselves up for major difficulty as soon as something goes wrong. And so we have to start thinking more rigorously, are we resilient as a society, or are we vulnerable as a society? So as to the meatpacking plant, it's a question of how the meatpacking plant is architected. So is it safe? Is it resilient with its workers? Or are they potentially have to shut down the whole plant because they're just not prepared to deal with an outbreak? And that's what happened.
Yeah.
I do believe all of us in society are learning from this experience, and we need to learn from this experience. Let me give you another point you didn't mention, but it's something I'm also passionate about, and I have also tried to work with other AGs on. So on the meatpacking plant, I and other AGs wrote to the Agricultural Secretary saying, here are some best practices that need to be put in place to protect worker safety. I also worked with other AGs to lobby the Senate, a familiar theme, to get money for broadband, because another point of failure is there are households who don't have broadband right now. So for kids who've been forced to doing online learning, they're not learning if they don't have broadband or devices, which means the most vulnerable during this time are falling further behind, and they'll never catch up. And if we have to do online learning next year, shame on us if we don't do more to address this digital divide. And that's another point about resilience. I
agree, especially in my district. I mean, even with trying to do these online enrichment classes, there were so many students that didn't have access for one reason or another. And that's just across the board of, everybody across the country was having these problems. So I do think that we need to address that, because we don't know what school is going to look like in the fall. And we do need to address this, and quickly.
Sally, let me ask you a question. What are you most excited to do when you get into the state Senate?
There's several things. So one of the things I've been trying to collaborate on is trying to get economic diversification in my district. Right now, a lot is put into one industry, and I really would like to see industrial hemp and even discussions around geothermal energy development. So, because there's a lot of fossil fuel workers that are furloughed and have lost their jobs. And I think that geothermal energy development would be a great transition. So I'm actually have been talking to different sectors of energy sectors, pipe fitters, and just having these conversations because I'm trying to organize a discussion event on this. And if I could get federal funding, maybe even bring it into an environmental recovery plan, which would be phenomenal. Even if it's just a pilot, it would be something that we could measure and move forward. So that's something I'm really excited about. And then also incorporating industrial hemp in that too, because of the properties of the hemp plant is so phenomenal in regards to carbon.
Well, let me add one more suggestion for that economic diversification. When the folks in your district have reliable, effective broadband, that will enable flexible work arrangements. So they might say, I can go to Denver one day a week or when really necessary, but otherwise I want to work from home. A lot of people might say, I'd love to live in Johnstown or wherever, because I want to be Sally's neighbor, but I need to make sure I can work from home. And people now are often realizing how effective workers can be working from home. So this is a pretty interesting game changer. When I visited Sedgwick County during the campaign, I met people there who were telecommuting with broadband.
And, you know, the pandemic has also brought, like, a lot of people wanted to do remote work, and the companies would be like, no, I don't know if I'm going to have productivity. I don't know if I like that for whatever reason. And now they're finding that it's working. So I think that's moving into the future as well. So I think you're right. Broadband is definitely something that we need to take care of because there's a lot of people that are trying to work from home and they're having difficulties with their internet dropping on them and they can't get work done. And that's also in my district, yes. So I agree with you 100%. Baby steps. Okay, and then environmental rollbacks.
So there's a lot that can be said on this. Let me start with the basics, which is the Clean Air Act protects our air quality and mandates that the EPA take reasonable steps to protect humans from any pollutants. And one of the pollutants that we know is carbon is contributing to climate change. The EPA, unfortunately, is not taking that mandate seriously. And in a case called Massachusetts versus EPA, it's very clear that state AGs can basically be a check on the EPA. And when the EPA fails to act appropriately to protect our land, air, or water, I will step up and be willing to protect Colorado. And unfortunately, I've had more than a few cases where we have to do just that.
Okay, we need that. I mean, the EPA is there, and it's weakened with the current administration. They've weakened the EPA. They've weakened the Endangered Species Act. I mean, it's just a long list. So we do need AGs to step up across the country and build those partnerships and then unite as a voice. Okay. And then also, last, we want to talk about women's healthcare rights, reproductive rights.
This is critical because if we are complacent, we could watch the chipping away or even the overruling of Roe versus Wade. And this, I believe, would be an affront to the cause of equality and autonomy. We need reproductive health care, whether it's birth control, whether it's access to RU 486 during a time when you can get it via telehealth, or abortion services. And so I've been very clear and consistent that I'm going to stand up and protect for the rights of everyone to have access to reproductive health care. And that's what I've been doing.
I know. I actually was on a call with you, and it was very impressive. And I'm glad that you're one of the champions that's standing for that. I also know too that the 22-week ban made it to the ballot, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, part of what people don't realize, because you're going to see all these talking points, there can be people who may not even realize they're pregnant for some period of time. And so part of what is going on is a lack of trust in doctors and patients and an effort to create constraints on the doctor-patient relationship. And I believe that doctors want to serve their patients ethically, appropriately. And I believe that the women who have to make these decisions are going to be thoughtful about what's best for them. And just to put a fine point on it, if you are raped or you are a victim of incest, this 22-week ban would say, doesn't matter. You can't get an abortion. That is an extreme consequence with long-term implications that the government should not be in the middle of.
And emotional.
Correct.
Yeah.
So basically, I believe that a mother's health needs to be a paramount consideration, both mental health and physical health. And a 22-week ban that would get in the way of a doctor taking account of a woman's mental and physical health is going against the doctor-patient relationship. It's going against an individual's autonomy. And that's why I'm concerned that there will be an effort to sell this on, let's call it talking points. We need to make sure to get the whole story out there.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was very informative. If anyone has any follow-up questions, we do have follow-up questions. Okay. Okay, Michelle has one in regards to the last that I just Dr. Bright's. She says, I am alarmed that politicians in my county and elsewhere in our state are creating entire platforms out of this issue and refuse to be respectful and kindly listen to the victims of incest or rape. How can we, I'm going to piggyback on that. So how can we as neighbors and friends and, family, how can we open up this conversation? What would be some sort of like suggestion or advice you would give for someone to basically open dialogue on this?
Well, Sally, if everyone was as good a listener as you, we'd be in much better shape on this. Your listening skills, your dialogue skills will elevate our civic discourse when you're in the state Senate. I will say that one of the challenges we face is stigma and fear. Whenever someone says to me, I was raped, I am in awe of their courage, because that's a hard thing to say. There's a lot of victims feel stigma, whether it's domestic violence or sexual assault. There's a stigma that a lot of victims feel. We've got to support victims so that it's safe to say, I was raped. And the next thing is, I was raped, I got pregnant, and then I got an abortion. Because part of the problem is when politicians, and Michelle's getting at this, can just use their talking points and abstract issues out of a context and position it in a way that is stripped of context, you can often sell an issue with these talking points like, we need to be tough on crime. That was one of those talking points. It was stripped of the context, so we didn't know what it meant, but people then took it. Or we have to stop abortion on demand would be another talking point that strips of the context. We need conversations rooted in context, rooted in authentic and honesty, and that's how we get past this.
I just don't understand how banning abortion is going to move the cause forward, because abortions will take place regardless. It's just that now you're going to see only the people with wealth able to get those abortions, and the people who are vulnerable will still not be able to get safe abortion or healthcare in regards to that. And see, that to me that's a huge disparity. I think that is something that You know, and who are we to decide, you know, as a government, who are we, even as a public official, to decide on what's right and what isn't right for an individual's healthcare decisions. It should be between their doctor and maybe their clergy person and, you know, them. I mean, these are personal decisions, and they are emotional decisions. I don't think, you know, I don't think people realize that. It's that, you know, a lot of times when a woman is pregnant, like you said, sometimes they don't even know they are, but then they do, and then something happens. They have to make that difficult decision.
Well, one more final point, Sally, which you're just representing. We need more women in office. We need more women in office. And I would say, because obviously I've got a bias, Democratic women in office. Democratic, authentic, creative problem-solving women in office. So Sally, you got to win because we need your voice.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. I'm sure Phil will come back another time because we have so many things to talk about. So thank you. Have a great evening. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email them to me at sally@sallyforcolorado.com. And I will follow up with you. And I will get that to Phil so then we can follow up with you. Thank you so much. Have a great night.